Juno's going to introduce Steve and Lindsey, and we're going to let them take over. So thanks for being here. And it's time for us to get rolling. Juno, would you like to introduce them?
Yes. Yes. I just want to let everybody know, this is basically a continuation of Chuck's and my idea, as well as Blair and Dave from last year, kind of the end of the season thing that we did with the clinics. But now this is, try to do a pre-season kind of thing. So these two people, these individuals I've known for a very long time. I've known them through Blue Springs, as well as through some of the drum corps that I've seen them with, BD, Brown Academy. So they have a lot of experience, but they have a lot of experience with a lot of different levels. So I asked them to join us, and thankfully they said yes. And it's Lindsey Vento and Steve Vento from Kansas City. So obviously they're joining us during a very important night for them. if you're a Chiefs fan.
Yeah.
And take it away, Lindsey.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We could talk marching band all day. And so we won't, though, because it's Sunday night and everyone has to teach tomorrow, I'm sure. We put together some things that I think are really, I think are the important to talk about. I'm sure a lot of you have your shows maybe going already. You have a vision for where things go. But I still think that a lot of the things that we're going to share today can be applied if you're already in motion or if you haven't started yet. Hopefully that's, helpful. Like Juno said, and it's so funny what our bios, whatever those are, say. We have, Capel High School and Steve taught at Broken Arrow, and we have Blue Springs and Vista Ridge out of Austin, Texas, and you have all these teams. But what I want everyone to realize is that that's like the 2% of what we do in life. Everybody else is, around that same tier of just trying to make it happen. We have a lot of schools on really tight budgets. We've got people that are just, the turnover rate, and they're still working at excellence being their number one goal. And so we always want to start meetings like that so it doesn't shy people away thinking, well, they wouldn't realize what we're dealing with. We totally do. We've got, Steve, how many shows did you write last year? 80 something?
Well, it was a COVID year, so some of my bands kept their show from 2020 to 2021. It was hard to keep track who kept stuff, who ordered, so usually I do right around 60. Those are custom shows. Lots of times I'll do another 15 or so that are from my website of shows that I've written before in the past, and we adapt it to make it fit other groups.
And so I say that only because so that everybody realizes they're not all BOA finalist teams, right? So we do design for everybody that you can think of on all levels. So I'm going to get to it because we could talk marching band all day.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
One thing is not just at all levels, but also all sizes. So I think that's a big thing too, is that, Juno and Joey and I, we work with this one band in Pennsylvania that, what's it have, like 20 wins? It's something like 20 wins, but they still do really, really, really well at not just against their size class, but even large classes, because that's the way to put together and design. So no matter what size, you can be competitive.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how to maybe close down the field a little bit and do a field layout in a cost-effective way that makes your band look a little more comparable in size and helps your kids not have to cover the same 100 yards as a band with 200 wins has to cover, right? That's no fun for Sally Flute. Freshman Sally Flute does not appreciate that. So I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully I do this correctly, because this always is like very stressful for me to do this. I'm always like panicked. Hold on, let me get to. And I just had my screen pulled up. So where is it now? We did a test for this for a reason. And, oh, there it is. Okay, good. So that's all I have to do. Understood.
There we go.
All right, good. So you can see that, yes?
Yeah.
Yep.
Love that. Okay, good. That's it. It's the sharing and the technology stuff that stresses me out. Design, got it. Technology, maybe not my thing. So a couple of things we're going to talk about to start is planning a show. And it's really just like it says, it's more than the show itself. It's so funny. It's like, hey, I got our show design. We're ready to go. And really that's like 0.5% of what that's like half of a step. There's like 97 more steps that follow that. So the biggest things that I feel is before you start to plan a show, this is before you start drafting a concept or before you start doing anything like that. It's knowing your goals, it's knowing your audience, and it's knowing the food in your pantry. And we're going to talk about like what all of those things mean. Know your goals first, then your show. And I think that's really key. I think a lot of teams and I say this, and Steve can attest to this, we all sit with our teams where they have these grand concepts and these grand ideas. And then I'll say, well, what are your goals? Well, I don't know. Well, we have to know goals, right? You have to know, where are we going with this? Who do we have? So artistically branding and gaining your audience, for me, now again, this is just Steve and Lindsey talking. There's no one way to do this, and I want to say that. But I think branding and knowing your audience and knowing who you are as a band and who you are as a program is going to sell more than anything else you could possibly do. We've got a lot of teams that are very committed to the brand and who they are. And when you continue to play to that over and over again, then there's now a culture and there's a buy-in from your kids. And it doesn't matter what show concept you put together, if you don't have buy-in from your kids, it isn't going to matter at the end of the day. So what are you wanting to say? And not just what are you wanting to say at a Saturday contest, what are you wanting to say at Friday night? Because your Friday night lights crowd are who pay the bills, right? Those are the people who buy your fundraisers and who do all the things. So what are you trying to say? What is your thing? And I know Steve can talk to this big time musically. Everybody needs a thing. And I know that seems really crazy, but over time, and this doesn't happen overnight, but it could take years to develop. But what is your thing? You know, we've got teams where being super unique and quirky is their thing. And then we've got teams where playing classical literature is their thing. And then we've got teams that like to reinvent themselves every year, and that's their thing. And then we've got teams that like to wear the color pink, and that's the thing. Your thing doesn't have to be huge, but if you have something that you're constantly leaning on, I think that helps you go down the road of what kinds of shows that work for you. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you go back to look into your concert repertoire that you play for your state festivals and everything. If you don't play orchestral transcriptions, then I don't think doing a classical show with classical composers is probably the right choice, because I've played in symphonies for years, and the weighting of notes as a trumpet player is different in that venue as playing Mahler as it is to playing a Sousa. It's a different style of approach on that brass pedagogy. And so I really think it's important to, whatever you do well, in the spring semester as you do your festival programming, you could pull a little snippet from that for the fall too. I think you could be a little more successful with that.
Yeah. And, using, like I had already mentioned, using the first few years to work through this, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, who you are and what your program is going to be and what they're going to be known for, what your niche is, happens over time. What your excellence goals are, I always call it what's in your pantry. It's like you're going to make chicken marsala. You don't have chicken and you don't have sauce, but you're determined to make chicken marsala. Well, it's not in the pantry. So I didn't know what it is or how we're going to make it. We don't have it. So again, it's choosing material for your band that they actually can play. You pick these grand pieces that have this wonderful wood. It's known for its woodwind quartet. Like there's some wonderful pieces out there that I've always wanted to put in a show, that if you don't play the saxophone quartet that piece is known for, then that piece doesn't work. And if you don't have a saxophone quartet, that food's not in your pantry. It's not something you pick. Are you trying to choose a show that's about, I don't know, Swan Lake or something that's really movement heavy driven, but you haven't drafted a movement visual training program with your wins yet? Well, that food's not in your pantry. So that may not be something that you want to lean on. So choosing material that allows excellence for your team, not because band XYZ did it, they did it really well, doesn't mean you're going to do it really well. If you don't have the things in your pantry that they do, it doesn't work. And what are the things that you want to improve on? What are the things that you want to hide? Hide. And I feel like Juno understands Blair, David, we're all, we're all adjudicators at the same time. And it is as much as the things that you want to showcase. I have this killer soloist, or my color guard is a massive strength, so I want to make sure I'm showing them off. And you want to do all that. You also want to hide the things you don't do well. It is possible. Everybody does it. Anybody who says they don't is lying. You have to hide the things that you don't do well. So you can say all you want, well, we have to have more woodwind exposure because the judges expect it. Well, do you want your woodwinds exposed more? It's not about woodwind exposure in general. If your woodwinds are not something that's going to bring excellence to the table, and they're not going to put that show forward, that isn't something that's in your pantry, and that isn't a strength of yours. So there are things that you can hide. If your mellophone section moves terribly, like it is, they're all freshmen, they're barely walking off the bus, much less 100 yards of space for 8 minutes straight, then that's something that you need to take into consideration. You need to take into consideration, should they be the ones jazz running 4 to 5 while playing? Probably not. So again, you hide the things that you don't want to expose. Stephen, I know you talk about this a lot with your groups when you're talking musically.
Yeah, and it goes back to soloists. Anytime I see band directors that, and I watch a band and the soloists are not what you expect being amplified, then I kind of question, why is that person having a solo? So, but my biggest question when I work with any band is like, who's your all-state players? Those are the people we want to feature. Just because Billy tries really, really hard, and he's been in band for 4 years, and and I just like his work ethic.
President.
His dad's the principal. We need to give him a solo. Well, some people can handle the solo, some people can't. And the same thing goes with small ensembles. Sometimes you can end up getting around the fact that they might not be an all-state player because they have more confidence playing in a smaller ensemble if they're at a certain level. But those are my two things musically. The last thing would be, let's go to Verdi's Requiem. I think we're on the Verdi's Requiem, and then the woodwind lick or the string lick, and it's adapted for woodwinds. So many times I hear percussion writing on top of the woodwinds on the xylophone and the marimbas, doubling it. So therefore you just take away your woodwind exposure. And it goes back to saying, yeah, I think my woodwinds can do this. You write it. No, they can't do it. Well, let's double it. Well, now we're adding
percussion in to hide the woodwinds, and it's like,
and now we lost that exposure, and we're adding clarity issues, and we're adding timing issues, tuning issues, because we know it's Michigan, and winds go one direction when it's cold, and some ensemble goes another direction.
What are you saying, that Michigan's not in tune because it's cold?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying when it's 30 degrees, because I think the only time you get to go inside is like when it's state championships, right? If they have it in the Detroit, right? But to get there, you have to play outside for the other 4 or 5 weeks, and what sounds great at 2 p.m. in October is totally different than 9 p.m. in October, and that's what I'm getting at. So
double reads are out. Got it. Made a note of that. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Also, next, brainstorming your concept. I think this is the fun part, right? I think this is the fun part of design. Brainstorming a concept where you sit around a table, whether you hire your design team out of house or you're in-house. It doesn't matter who's doing it. Brainstorming the concept is the most fun part. Sadly, it's sometimes the only fun part to this, right? Because it's so much that goes into this. It's so much that goes into it. That people don't see what happens behind the scenes. It's always this age-old question. We get asked these questions all the time. Do you design the visual first or the music first? I don't know. I designed it all first. I don't know. It all kind of goes together. We have to pick something first. It's never the same for every single team. And it's not going to be the same for you every season. So you can use the same formula. Say that you have a concept and you think that I want to make sure that they have all of this movement. I see these images for drill and I have all of the props in my head and now let's fit music to that. Great. That is a correct way to go. Or I have this piece I've always wanted to play. So now what do we do? Okay, well now let's find a field landscape that works for you. That's an also okay way to go. the aesthetics first, which is where I always tend to lie a little bit. It's funny, I'm known as a visual person, but I have a music degree. So it's interesting that I go from the aesthetics first. What do I want it to look like? What's the vibe that I want to create? What are the colors? What are the, what's the imagery? What do I want it to look like as I'm sitting in an audience and I look over in the end zone? Am I captivating in the end zone? That, I know that sounds really silly, but to me that matters. You know, when you look over and a band's walking on the field, if you are so striking, just looking at you walk in, the color guard costuming or your vinyls or the silks they're holding or whatever it is, that matters. That's effect. If you can be effective in the end zone, then you're set up more to be effective on the green space. So visual, music, aesthetics, it really is whatever works best for you. There is no right or wrong way. The vibe that you create and want to sell matters. And people go, well, what does vibe mean? Do your students, not you, do your students gravitate more towards something that's more lighthearted and quirky? Do they want to do things that are more contemporary and a little more avant-garde? Do your students gravitate more towards the classics? You know, what do they gravitate more towards? I think right now I don't know where the world is and where times are. You know, I could beg anybody to just stay away from dark and angry shows about death and gloom. That would be great. No one wants that right now. You could turn on the news and get death and gloom. I don't know that we want to do a show about it, right? So, you know, what is it that your students gravitate towards as far as the vibe that you want to create? There is so much that you can pull out of the word vibe for your show. Maybe that's sound design. That's your electronic design. You've got certain sound samples that you really, really like. You know, you listen to the Tron Legacy soundtrack and you go, man, I love this vibe. That vibe matters. You can take that vibe and put that with anything you want. So I find that to be really, really, really important. Steve, do you like, you with all of the teams that you design for as well, how does that work for you as far as music, visual first, all of that? It's all different, right? There's no one.
It's all different.
Yeah.
Sometimes someone pitches a show they want to do something French based, you know, and then we start researching French composers, French music, French styles, you know, those type of things, you know. And then we try to get a wide diversity of that, from Debussy to Ratatouille, you know, and everything in between, you know. And so just try to find those type of things. It just doesn't have to be always the classical composers that are public domain. There's also some really good stuff too, you know, that's in movies or in concert bands or whatever the case may be, you know.
The next one, I always put a smiley face after, because I say this, I'm almost talking to myself too. Can you support your grand ideas? I've got this idea, okay? It's like Red Robin Hood. She's gonna come out from the back and like the wolf, and then we're gonna have someone elevate. I don't know how, but she's gonna levitate, and then we're gonna have these birds fly over. I don't know how we're doing it yet, but the band dad works for NASA and he's awesome. So then we're gonna do that. And you've got the things that you're describing, and these grand ideas that you're convinced you're gonna change the marching arts 8 minutes at a time, and you've got it, and you're convinced. And you say these ideas and you don't have anything yet to support it. That is important. If you, after your design meeting, if you're looking at these things and you're thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to do these 8 things, but these 2 things, I'm going to nail these. If you've got more things on the list of, I don't know how we're going to do that, then that's a red flag. That is a massive red flag. Whether that's, I don't know how we're going to pay for it. I don't know if I have the kids to play that music. I don't know if we can afford those props. I don't know if the guard can have custom costumes this year. All of those things. Don't leave a design meeting with these grand ideas knowing that you can't support half of the things that are necessary for that idea. I'll
add on that with props, because there's sometimes Lindsey designs a Winter Guard show, and then I'm the guy that builds the props for her show.
I'm not lying. It's true story.
And there's other times where you're planning on these band dads to do it, but then all of a sudden this weekend's busy. Oh, they can't do this weekend, this weekend, this weekend. Now it's April and we still have a prototype. And you're wondering, okay, is this concept going to work without this prop? You know, so just making sure you set kind of a schedule for your band parents, you know, whether or not they work for NASA or work for somewhere else, you know, just try to plan that out for
That's
them.
your pantry, you know, it's not just your student pantry, it's your booster pantry. Like, do you have these things that are actually going to support the meal you're trying to make for dinner? I can't tell you, when it comes to brainstorming concepts, I can't tell you how many times, and I don't say this in a boastful way. Anyone who knows me, like, I mean, Juno and Joey, they can attest. I am not a boastful person, even a little, but I can't tell you how many times I've won a class title at BOA with a show called Blue, or a show called Into the Wild, or like, what's it mean? I don't know. It's Into the Wild and we've got animal print and there's a cage. What's it about? There's animal print and a cage. It doesn't have to have you don't need a libretto. You should not need a libretto. I should be able to, as from an adjudicator, I should be able to just watch your band and not have to go back to the program and say, what in the HE double hockey sticks was that? Like, what are we trying to do here? I shouldn't need you to spell it out in the program to convince me of what it is that you're doing. So I say this really transparently. The amount of class titles at BOA or state championships that we have won with such broad brush stroke concepts that don't have to tell a story. It's really about a color. I can go on Shutterstock and I can find an image that I love and the entire show is about that image. Well, what's it about? That image. Well, what do you mean it's about that image? We're going to put it on the props and we're going to put it on the costume and we're going to put it on the flags and we're going to play music that when you look at that image, it makes you feel like this. That's what the show's about. So I say that that we aren't getting into this thing that you have to dive so deep into this brainstorming of the concept thing. It can actually be the most shallow thing that you do as a band director. You can find an image, you can find a title, you can find one piece of music and then run wild with it. As adjudicators, we don't need you to tell this massive story. There do not have to be characters. It doesn't have to be, we are essentially, and again, I don't know your Michigan sheet, so forgive me if I'm speaking incorrectly, and I'm sure you guys will tell me, no, that's on our sheet. I know in Bands of America, I can speak for that. And I mean, there's 1A, class 1A to 4A. There's nowhere on there that says, do I get your concept? That's not a bullet point on the back of any sheet. Do I get your concept? It's, do I get your intentions? Do I understand where your staging is? Are things coordinated? Is it creative? None of that says, do I understand your storyline? Does it flow together? And flow is, does this music connect to this music, connect to this music? It's, do I know where to look at all times? It's, is there a beginning and a middle and an end? It's all of those things, but none of it, again, says, do I like your show title? None of it. It's just really, truly not about that. So when you're brainstorming your concept, you want to think more about what is it that I can sell really, really, really well, and what are my strengths? Like, is your color guard a strength? Well, if they are, you should play to that, and you should play to that really, really big, because their effectiveness of being staged on the field in wonderful ways, musically picking up the woodwinds than the brass and the trumpet feature than your soloist, is more important than what your show is about, if that makes sense. And hopefully I'm speaking to the Michigan sheets. I mean, you guys are like, no, that's actually bullet point 1. I don't know. But I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it's not.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is ambiguity, and just making sure that if you just do a show title, show concept, that is very, very broad. You won't get painted in a corner through a part of the show. Yep. And then on the creative side of things, creativity of instrumentation and creativity of arrangements and creativity of combination of instruments, I think, is huge. So many times people have a small band, they think we all have to play all the time. And then by the closer, they're tired. There still can have woodwind moments. You can still have percussion transitions. You can still have front ensemble electronics. You still have solos. You can have small ensembles. Just be creative in your delivery of the music, so it's not everyone's playing all the time.
Yep. I think I covered all that page. Gosh, I could talk about the concept thing forever. We should make that a full Sunday because there's so many things. Okay, next page, if I could get to my little guy here. Designing a show part 1, because yes, it has 19 parts. No, I'm kidding, but it could. It very much could. And I do put on here, yes, on a budget, because I don't care if we're in a pandemic or we're not, or if this band's struggling financially, but this one's not. I'm always going to lean towards on a budget. And I know people look at the shows I design and they go, there's no way, you don't know how to design on a budget. I'm like, I'm going to tell you right now, we did not pay what you think we paid for any of this. This is not, you can look expensive without being expensive. And I'm going to get a t-shirt that says that and sell it or something.
And all that same lines, I know you see a lot of the stuff we do with Blue Springs. We are 50% free or reduced lunch at Blue Springs High School. And so it's not like everyone drives a Tesla, that's Capel. Everyone, that's a totally different level of money down there, but in Blue Springs, yeah, man, it's just, we are very stickler on budgets. And so I just want you to make sure we're aware of that. We talk a good game, but we also support the game that we preach about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important when people see what it is that we do and who we work with. I want to really, what I'm saying is I want you to take it genuinely, because I'm telling you, we have to design on a budget every day of our lives. So why props and then how? And I don't know how it is in Michigan. I wish I knew more. I know some. I don't know. Do you guys use a lot? Are there bands that use them often? Yes,
Yeah.
There are. Are there bands that use them not so greatly? Do they feel they have to move them all the time?
Yep.
God, I don't have to do that. You don't have to do that at all. I think props are, this is also a big touchy subject, right? When people are like, so many props, why do we need all these props? Well, you don't need all these props, and some bands could do completely without them. I am a fan of them if, number one, they don't break the bank, and number two, you're not relying on, I don't know, if you have alternates or whatever you might call them, like your kiddos that may not necessarily march a dot, but they're in the show. Let's lean on these kids to march a prop. Well, there's a reason they're not in a dot, right? So now we're counting on them to move set pieces around the entire show for 8 minutes. And then you're expecting the kiddo that you didn't know was going to hang in a show to actually show up and only move a prop 3 times and actually expect them to come back on Tuesday. Like, none of that, when you say it out loud, you're like, no, it doesn't really make sense. I don't know why we do that. It took me numerous years of having to redo drill to realize that we shouldn't do that. You benefit them, and how do you benefit from them? Everybody has the same 100 yards of green. You know what I mean? It's like you have a house. It's like you have a homes tour, right? Those homes tours, or what's it called? Where you walk through different homes and
creative homes.
At least we have them in Kansas City, and you go through them and you're like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this. I love this. Well, if every house looked exactly the same, there's no creative homes. Like, nothing sticks out about that because every house looks the same. And so that's what we have when we talk about the field. It's 100 yards of green that everybody has. You have to make yours look different. You have to build your house different. You have to make your living room look different than someone else's living room, right? And so I think that's a huge way how we benefit from them. I also, from a visual design standpoint, I think I know this, I don't know. Okay. I think it minimizes the amount of time that everybody is required to march and move around the field. Again, it's the same thing where you wouldn't want your band everybody playing tootie for 8 minutes. Well, we also don't want them marching tootie for 8 minutes. It goes the same on both sides. So then when you don't want your woodwinds marching all the time, and you don't want them holding and looking exactly the same every time, you have to have somewhere for them to go, right? And if you have zones and props for them, you just circle your woodwinds around here and you do some body around it, like some really minimal arm stuff. You've now created this massive texture, and you're not asking your woodwinds to march 20 more pages of drill. So I think it goes the same way for musically and visually, where you wouldn't want them playing everything all the time, and we don't need them marching everything all the time. I think that's really important to note. And I think that's how props really, 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 really help that. I find that they benefit smaller bands and less experienced bands for those exact reasons. When you have set pieces and zones that you can place your students at, and you still look part of the show and you look part of the landscape, I find it just as effective as if you've got vinyl flats all over on side one and you have kiddos over there playing music, but they're just standing in front of one doing a nice little body lean. I find that just as effective as them marching 10 pages of drill to that, right? I mean, so again, and you're saving yourself in the excellence category. I'm going to guess they're going to stand in a lunge, you know what I mean, for 40 counts, a lot cleaner than they're going to march 10 pages of drill for 40 counts. I'm thinking, right? And so you're still being as effective. And those smaller bands, you can use them to close down the field. Again, we're asking wins of 200 and wins of 45 to cover the same amount of yards. It's just not, you can't do it. That's just not, it's just not effective, and it's not good for the kiddos. So I think closing the field down with props, I think, is really, really, really important. How does that work for you musically, Steve? I know it does, but.
Yeah, well, I had this one band a few years ago that was trying to compete in St. Louis against all the 200-piece bands, and they were never competitive with it. And so it was Lafayette, Missouri, and they hired me to program their show. And I knew that they played pretty well. So instead of having everybody out there playing all the time and trying to create like the typical show to be competitive with those 200-piece bands, I knew they had 3 practice fields to work with during band camp. And so we put the front ensemble on the field, like about 4 steps behind the front hash. We used props to go from like 8 or 12 steps almost to the center X on the 50, all the way down to the 25-yard line. And these were your 10 foot by 10s, you know, those props and those vinyls. But then we did part 1, everybody plays. Then we had the percussion transition to part 2, it was just woodwinds. Then part 3 was brass. Part 4 was percussion and guard. Part 5, everybody played. And we did that scene for a couple of years, and all of a sudden they're winning first place all, you know, against these 200-piece bands. And this is a band of maybe 14 percussion and 35 to 40 wins, you know, and a dozen guard. And so we just designed the show so we would be smarter than the other guys. So during band camp, one teacher took the brass, one teacher took the percussion, one teacher took the woodwinds, and we're able to teach part 2, 3, and 4. And then they put together and put part 1. So by the end of band camp, they had part 1, 2, 3, and 4 pretty much mastered out there. And all you had to do was put part 5 on. And it was their most successful years they've ever had. You know, and then COVID hit and
you were able to do that because you used props to close down the field.
Yeah, yeah.
Allow places for people to go bye-bye for a little bit and not be present all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
I think is important.
yeah, so I mean that's really good advice from Lindsey, and that's a way to utilize and create creativity on the arrangements just by, oh wow, we just used the woodwinds this minute and a half, we just used the brass for this minute and a half, we just did percussion and guard, made a little winter guard show, you know, and then save the bookends for a full band. Just say, yeah, don't forget we can play too as a full 2D ensemble. So that's food for thought.
The biggest one is low cost does not mean low effect. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've said that. It doesn't have to be expensive to look expensive. And I'm going to show you guys some images, examples of kind of how I've done things and the cost of actually what it was. Let's see. Again, field layout's a huge key to success, in my opinion. How you lay out your field. I think can just give you so much benefit. If I can get this little arrow to come up, and there it is. Okay, so this top left, I tried to chop out all the names of the schools because I didn't ask. I always like to ask my teams permission before I show their stuff. But the one at the top, those look like boxes. They're actually scaffolding. And that team actually got scaffolding half price because they had a band parent who was a manager at Home Depot. And I'm telling you, somewhere in your band, you've got connections, whether it's Lowe's or a lumber yard or steel or someone's a welder or whatever. Like somewhere in your band parents, you've got connections. But that top band that's up there in the picture in the top left, we just used scaffolding. And they paid for all of that right there. They've $2,500. And those in the center, those are just the one on the very bottom is a tarp. And then from their winter guard from the previous 2 years ago, we cut a circle, flipped it over to the black side. Again, didn't cost anything. And then on top of it, they cut out these big plywood pieces, circles that held it down because it's windy. So it gave us another stage. It gave us another layer of aesthetic. And it also held the tarp down. Hashtag logistics. But that at the very top cost them $2,500. And to me, that looks way more expensive than $2,500. That gave us a ton of usable space. It cut the field down. You can see when we have the soloist in the back side two corner, how effective that is just by having that one person in that open space. The one right below that band, oh man, I can't remember how many wins. They were a 1A band. They actually won the 1A class at Bands of America. But they look like yellow flats, but they were just wooden frames. They were big wooden frames that just cut out they cut plywood, but they were these massive 8x8 frames. And it was really cool because you could stage things behind the frames where players were standing and playing through them. Color guard could walk through them. You could have drill that passes through them. And it was all very cool. But that whole thing right there cost them $1,500. Again, to me, that looks way more expensive than $1,500. And it allows them to do a whole bunch of stuff. The bottom one, that band right there is 100 wins. And those are 4x4 wooden boxes that the band parents made. It cost them $900. They stayed intact all year long. They touched up paint just like you would have to do any other time. But look at all of the things that you can do on that. You can change the field so many ways. And it gives yourself an identity. And I think, again, we go back to the branding. I think giving yourself a visual identity is really important. Musically, this opens the door to so many things for you to do. Having mini boxes just on one side that allow you to be staged. The top right corner, all of those things were vinyls. The one big white stage, ignore that. They've used that stage 4 years. I think they paid, they probably paid a couple $1,000 for it, but they used it 4 to 5 seasons. So they just kept reusing it and they kept putting new contact paper over the top. So it looked different every year, right? And then the rest of it is just vinyl. And I think they spent $1,800 in vinyl and their parents made PVC pipe frames. And it makes a big, huge difference on the field setup. And they didn't spend a ton of money. Do you guys in Michigan, do you see a lot of props? Do you find that bands are spending a lot? Is the budget? I mean, how does that work there?
I think it varies. It varies from program to program. I think this seems like a lot of our smaller programs, they'll utilize props, they'll reuse them year after year. But we do have a few, of our larger, more competitive programs that definitely some of them take up the entire field with props. Yeah. And it's something that it's a gimmick that they've done for years, and it's always something completely different. But it, the amount of money, it varies obviously from program to program.
Right. But
So
go ahead.
Well, like any of those vinyl scrims, there's companies out there that ends up costing about, if you buy something from Shutterstock or create your own image, it ends up being like $1 a square foot. So if you have an 8x8 vinyl that you need, so that's $64, for that, and so, and then you can pay an extra price for Velcro it, or you can have your grommets on there, or your band parents can actually do their own adhesive on whatever it is. But the thing is, like using the scaffolding or having something that you can reuse from year to year to year, you can make the field setup look totally different just by changing out the vinyls. You
And when
know?
we go back to the show concept slide from a few times ago. And that question is, well, what do you want to do this year? I don't know, but I've got 15 scaffolding. Great. That's where we start then. You start with what you have. You start with what's in your pantry. Well, what are we going to do with the scaffolding? I don't know. You want to put vinyl on it? You want to paint them red and call the show Fire and play Firebird, and the guard has they're dragons. They have a cool headpiece. Like, you know what I mean? You can create a concept within 30 seconds just by going on one word, and things start spinning off of that. So again, these are things that you might have in your pantry that I think are pretty cool. A custom music book that's not custom. I love talking about this with Steve. I love talking about it because so many people say, well, I can't afford a custom show. That's like whatever, how many thousands of dollars. And isn't it sad? I don't even know what it costs. And we live in the same house and work in the same company. I have no idea what it costs. But there's so many that don't want to do that custom music book because it is so expensive. And I agree. There are some times where it's just some years you can't do it, but I find that there are ways that you can do a custom book that's not custom. And I'm going to let Steve talk a lot about this, but I always go to the custom for someone else can be brand new for you. So it's that whole redo concept where you go to an arranger and you say, what have you got that you really like that you've already written? And he or she sends you a few options. My ask of you is when you get it, print it off or pull it up. I get printed off like it's 1997. I'm sorry, you guys probably use iPads now. I'm still a paper girl, but you pull it up on your iPad and your fanciness, but cover the title. Don't look at what it used to be called. Listen to the score. Look at the score. Do you like it? Does it fit your kids? And if it does, find a new title and find a new concept. What tends to happen is you get a score and you look at it and you go, oh, well, this is a show about Vikings. I don't want to do a Viking show. Well, that's what someone else used it for. That doesn't mean that music has to be used for that show. So again, I just encourage you to open the door to using a custom arranger. Someone who really, really, truly does this for a living is key. It's not just about how well they arrange. It's about them knowing your sheets, judging wise. It's them knowing pacing. It's them knowing flow. It's them knowing primary and secondary focus, all of that boring stuff that we have to care about. I think it's really, really, really important. But I think there's a ton of ways that you can get custom, semi-custom, redo, start from scratch, all of that. Steve?
Yeah. So most arrangers that you go to, they'll have a website and they can have all shows all there, or they might have done by movements. When I have somebody that reach out to me and say, hey, we want to look at this show, I send them a perusal PDF score and an MP3. And if they want to use that straight as is, that's great. They print it off. I ask them, okay, mark in red Sharpie what you want to change and everything like that. Scan it back to me and I'll adjust it for you. But some people say, hey, I want to do this tune from this show, this tune from this show, this tune, this show. Can you put it together and redo the transitions? Well, yeah, because I've already written. That's a lot less work. It's a lot less work to do that. So many times I feel like people are, my comment I get when they call me for an arrangement, I'm a year away from doing something custom. I'm a year away. No, you could probably make it happen right now. It's just you have to take the leap, because if you're buying stuff off the shelf and not adjusting to fit your band, realize that music was written for another band that had different strengths and weaknesses for you. So now we're playing catch up right off the bat. Like just for instance, I've been doing this since like 1994, and I have, let's say, 700 shows I've written. Most of those shows are between 3 and 4 tunes. So that means I have around 2,400 pieces of music that I've written. If you want to do Beethoven, I got every Beethoven you probably want to do. If you want to do Shostakovich, I've done the most popular Shostakovich you probably want to do. Mixing and matching that stuff is easy, and building the transitions and afterwards, that's the only type of creative thing to make it your show. And I think that's the biggest thing, is knowing that just because they had this show concept with this music doesn't mean you have to do that show concept of this music. It can mean something totally different than you.
And make sure that you have an arranger. If you hire out, make sure you have an arranger that is willing to make edits for you, not just write it and send it off and then you're stuck with it. Nothing is unedited, whether you're building a house or you're buying a new car, right? And you meet with your person a few times until we get that number right, or whatever it is, everything takes edits. It doesn't matter what it is. And so that is the same for your score and your music. It requires edits. And so making sure that you're using someone who's willing to hear you, to listen to you, to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and make edits as needed. And again, we're going to dive way into that next month with how to communicate with your design team, because I think that's a really big thing.
I think another last thing that I could say, then you can go on to your thing, is the timeliness of the arranger as well. Make sure you get communication, a contract, all that. And if you say you want your whole show by May, then you get your whole show by May. If you say something else that, hey, it's totally cool for me to get the closer in Bandcamp, well, then just expect to get it at Bandcamp. For me, I do 60 custom shows, and I make sure I get everybody done by June 1st, except my college bands, because college bands are totally different. So I think it's highly important for you to communicate to the arranger of knowing when his writing schedule is and so on and so forth through the process. And if you don't get something by a certain time, reach out to them. If they start ghosting you and don't return your phone calls, your text or emails, let's be honest. Everyone has a smartphone and they have all that access. That's a red flag right off the bat to me of, wow, this is probably this could go south in a hurry if I keep on getting ghosted. So keep that in mind.
The next thing is costuming. How is that in Michigan? Do we have bands that like custom printed things and shirts, and they like to change up the uniform a lot, and right? Again, it goes back to the field setup thing too. It just makes you look unique. It makes you look you. It gives you an identity. And I think students more than anybody else love having their own identity. There's no student who has a brand new custom printed shirt or a new look to a new little small addition, to their uniform. It doesn't walk off the bus a little taller, because they feel cool and they feel unique and they feel that value in what they're wearing. Why is it helpful and how can you benefit? It's not only the teams with money. It is interesting. Well, I can't afford that. A lot of times schools have to go that route because they can't afford to buy new band uniforms that are, hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the most cost-effective way for costuming, is to go with a printed shirt, or a special custom shako, or something that's hanging on your existing uniform, or just changing a shirt under your uniform, I think is important. That's a big thing. And that elevates that concept. Like if your concept is, again, you find this imagery on Shutterstock and you're going to do an entire show on this image. Well, you better believe I'm plastering that somewhere on the band uniform, because again, it's going to elevate the entire concept, and coordination is key. So when you can coordinate what the band looks like and what the guard looks like and what props look like, then that's a win-win.
And those custom tops sometimes cost what, $50?
Yeah, they're like $58. And
then the shako wraps are what?
20 to 30. And that's a lot of money saved instead of buying brand new band uniforms. I can't tell you how many bands I have that say, I don't have enough band uniforms. What am I going to do? And I also can't tell you how many times I've bought things off Amazon for my teams. So, that's it. There's a ways you can look expensive without being expensive. Again, I'll go through these quick, but my school requires school colors. How can I make this work when we need a new show look? Those are all things that are easy. You can find things that are show colors. I can't tell you how many times I've told a band, hey, go on Amazon and find a compression shirt that is your school color, and it's just solid, and stick it under your band uniform. Because again, you're appeasing your admin, but you're also being coordinated with your entire concept. Here are some examples just to show you. This one in the very center up top, that's Vista Ridge High School. That band top was $50. They wore it over their existing bibbers. They changed their entire band look to fit their show concept for $50. I think that because knowing that kids will go to Starbucks for $7 a time, $50 is not that much money to change and elevate your entire program. On the far right, again, existing band uniforms. It's the same band uniform in the bottom image. I just changed the skirt drop. That's a piece of striped fabric. And then we had a shirt made to go under. We cut off the band uniform sleeves because the school says, well, we're going to get you new band uniforms soon. And we said, well, can we cut the sleeves off and start putting custom shirts underneath it? And they said, sure. And every year we took that same uniform. We had those uniforms for 15 years. We took that same uniform and changed the look every single year for not a lot of money. On the bottom, that costs $20 to add strings of ribbon to every single uniform that coordinated with the prop in the back of the field. Now the one on the far left, that is a custom uniform. That's absolutely a custom uniform. And that did cost a lot of money. But and I put that up there for a reason. When you compare that one on the left to the others, one isn't better than the other. They all have their own value. They all coordinate with their program as they're supposed to coordinate it with. The one on the left is more than everything else on the page, but I still would choose everything on the page over and over again because it coordinated with whatever that concept was. And I think giving your students an identity in that is really, really important. Again, it goes to what do I do first when I design a show? I'm an aesthetics leaning person. So this is part of my process and how I design a show is what is the band going to wear? What is going to wear?
Along with that, there's sometimes we hit what is called the Crown store or some other used for those plumes. We didn't buy those plumes brand new on the right. We got those used from somebody that changed their school colors or changed their stuff. And so they just wanted to get rid of their inventory. We probably got a half price.
Well, but those were used Shakos as well. I found those Shakos on a youth site, and every shake, I mean, God bless it. And that team over there would finish 9th at Grand National Finals that year. Every single Shako, if you took that Shako piece off that we wrapped it with, every Shako looked different because I just had to scrounge for new Shakos. And so every one of them looks different. I'm telling you, like, it looks expensive on the outside, but there's ways to make it look like that are cost effective. I think it's really important. So next one to kind of like tap into what we've already talked about really quickly, finalizing concepts. And I would even love, like, if you guys have some things, I don't know if this is okay to open the door, but if you guys have some things that you're like, hey, I'm thinking about XYZ, or maybe you don't want to say that to the whole, but there's a way that we can chat with you about that. Like, you've got questions of what we're saying. I'm happy to answer questions and do emails this way. I could teach about this stuff and talk about this stuff forever. The production document. This is the holy grail of marching band to me. It's an entire Excel spreadsheet of every rehearsal letter in the score, of what the woodwinds are doing, what the brass are doing, what the color guard is doing, and what the field looks like for every single measure in the entire score. And that's what I do when I design a show. So I'm going to talk through that, about how that is like going to be the holy grail of what you do. And then communication with your design team. I think that's also, that's a tricky thing, right? You want to respect what they do and you want to trust them, but you also want to have open door communication and what information should I provide and what is too much information and, all of that stuff. So I know we have just a couple minutes left. I don't know if we want to do questions, or did I talk too fast? I mean, there's so much info.
I saw something on the chat.
Is there? I was sharing my screen, so I couldn't see it.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, can't wait that's awesome. Thank you. Does anybody on here have questions? I know it's late for you there. It's like 9:30, so.
No, that was great information for sure.
Is probably too much. Was it a lot?
It was perfect.
No, I know you want to
No, I
try to
think
get
it
through it
was
as
great.
quickly as possible.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I wanted to, there's so much to say, and you always want to give everything ample time.
Hey,
You have so
brother.
much to cover.
No, this is great. Thanks so
Good.
much for being here.
Yeah.
This will be up by the middle of the week on our website. So if you want to check it out, just to see how it went and spread the word, everybody, that it went as well as it did tonight, and to let everybody know that in a month or 4 weeks from now, we're looking forward to having these guys here again. So this is fabulous.
At the correct time. We have it now. We got it. Eastern time zone. Understood. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for being here. And Lindsay and
Yes.
Steve, thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thank
Thank
you.
you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And,
Lindsay.
Having
Looking forward to the next time. Thank
All
you.
right.